These are the sort of criteria that we'll be looking at applying in looking at who we would work with. Again, pretty common sense stuff. To the extent it's around, we're looking at capability and track record. They need to be registered chips, to use the new vernacular. Some capacity to show they can work together in partnership. So these are going to be the kind of things that we'll use to sort of select who we would look at working with. And they're just some implementation dates now. They are, to be honest, even more indicative than normal, because this is something that we don't know a lot about yet. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at timeline-wise, and it may well, and when all this emerges and a model gets identified, it might need to have some kind of formal consultation as part of next year's annual plan, but it might not. And then, you know, you kind of start to look at a potential implementation commencing very gradually from somewhere around halfway through next year. But that too is just an indicative. So that's about all, I think, Madam Chair. We're happy to answer questions. Obviously, Mr. Bodman's here from... Rowan. Introduce Rowan as well. My apologies.
So we've got a good team for answering questions. We've got Councillor Fletcher, Member Ngamani, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Watson, Councillor Casey.
And Walker.
Well, Madam Chair, thank you. And you've asked us to be succinct today. I just want to move the recommendations because I feel that the objectives are well articulated, that the concerns that others might have, I think, are satisfied with the point that has been made in terms of ring fencing, the resources and the funds associated with this. And I think it's a really good set of recommendations, and I'd like to commend all of the officers who have worked on it.
Thank you, Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Appreciate that. And Councillor Cooper will second.
Just if we could add an S on Roman numeral 1 for community housing providers, because I understand it may be consortium, and just not limit us to one. Is that acceptable to the mover?
Yeah.
Just give some more scope than just choosing one.
All right. So we'll go through and take questions, and then we can speak to the recommendations.
And take out the A.
Kia ora, great initiative. In the Māori impact statement, you talk about that Māori space and some of the information around that and the importance of having mana whenua and urban Māori authorities engaged in the process. Would you, just wondering whether there needs to be a draft objective that actually says that will happen as a draft objective. So I'm suggesting some wording around that. And I wondered if you'd have any problem around that, just given the 32% of main applicants being Māori, and your acknowledgement of the partnership approach that needs to tap into those opportunities that exist within tribal interests and urban Māori authorities. Do you have any problem with maybe adding that as a draft objective?
Well, I guess the only issue is that we're assuming the primary criteria for, if you're talking, there's having objectives, which are what we want to achieve at the end, and then there's having some clarity about the types of partners we want. Obviously, we are very interested, as this report notes, in working with iwi. We would want there to be clarity, though, that at the end of the day, we need to select potential partners, whether it's for tenant management or development, who have got the experience and capability to contribute. So I guess that would be the qualification of it.
I mean, right, and in terms of that, like, what we're seeking is really that you have an engagement plan.
Oh yeah, we're fine with
around
that. Yeah, we're fine if you
rather
want to make
than
that explicit. Yeah,
anything
it's
too
our
directive.
intention, so we're fine to formalise
So I mean, I've got some wording here that's pretty, just develop an engagement plan that will ensure mana whenua and urban Māori authorities are fully aware of the opportunities and are encouraged to participate to enable recognition of karaua and kuia. you.
Or we can pop that in the objectives. Yeah, I don't, anyone's got any problem with that? We don't need to, I mean, we could put it in as a recommendation, or we could actually just put it in the
Yeah,
objectives
either way,
as
as
a
long as
done
it's
deal.
part of the
Roman numeral
draft.
10 on the objectives.
Yeah.
would be
Yeah,
great.
exactly. Exactly. Okay, councillor Cooper.
Yeah, I had some more questions. Oh, I guess it's a debate as well now. It's
No,
on the table.
no, it's been moved and seconded,
yep.
that's fine, we can
So
take a
thank you.
round of
So
questions
just,
and then we'll go to
Thank you, and as the second, I'm really fully supportive of this, and my understanding is with the meeting with some of the community housing providers that they're keen to engage in this process, and it seems to me that there's also an opportunity for mixed tenure, which I think it gives us that opportunity to get right into the affordable market, which is something that it's very difficult for private developers to do. At the same time, not overburdening the ratepayers, which of course is something that some ratepayers find unpalatable, paying for someone's house, but as taxpayers we do that as well. However, I suppose for me, as long as we're looking at it that we're not just creating more older adult housing, basically tripling the size of those all over the place, and we're giving younger families and first home buyers opportunities that they might not otherwise get. So I guess was a statement, but also a question, just a reassurance that that's the case. It's in here, but
Yeah, look,
I'd
I
like
think
to
our
see
own
somehow-
thinking plus the feedback from the third sector is that
yeah.
there needs to be more of a mix thought about. Now, that won't be appropriate for every site, so that's part of what has to be thought about and rolled out, what sites might be suitable, presumably probably slightly larger ones for more of a mix. And so that's definitely in the frame for working through.
Thank you.
councillor Watson.
Thanks. Yeah, just looking to reconcile the verbal statement to the effect that we want to make a real difference in social housing with the phrase that's actually used in the draft objective, which is to maintain at least the current level of older adult provision in social housing. Notwithstanding everything you've said in your presentation, obviously just to maintain, at least maintain, just maintaining with a growing population means you're actually falling behind, of course. So I'm just questioning that particular use of that phrase there. It doesn't seem on the face of it to be particularly aspirational, but perhaps maybe I'm reading too much into it. But that doesn't sort of mesh those particular words with making a real difference, is what I'm saying.
Madam Chair, if I could respond, Councillor. I mean, I think what we were trying to do is give comfort to Council that we're not going to go out and remove all the affordable housing and build a whole lot of other housing. I think so the maintain was we guaranteed the commitment to the existing stock, and that's why the word maintain was there, and then the intention clearly is to grow the stock, and that's an aspiration. So it was trying to build the comfort that councillors needed, that we weren't simply going to just change this whole portfolio overnight to something else. That was not the intention, was to at least maintain what we've got and grow.
Councillor Casey.
A couple of questions, David or Graham. First of all, can you tell me how many people are waiting to go into our council houses for older people? It's a waiting list at the moment.
Let me have on that one. Sure.
Through the chair, I haven't actually got the specific numbers with me, but I recall it's in the vicinity of about 300 from memory.
Thank you. Like Councillor Watson, I have a real concern about the maintain existing stock. When we have a waiting list, we have a waiting list, and Housing New Zealand has a waiting list, and there is a patent need, as the seniors panel advised in their submission to you, why we wouldn't be committing to growing that sector, to building more pensioner housing. So what I hear from David is the yield on the site. The yield is not increasing the pensioner stock, it's increasing the stock, as Councillor Cooper noted. So my preference is for a commitment to more houses for the people who need them in Auckland who are over the age of 60. And you mentioned Wilshire, and that was the test case, but in actual fact, we lost units at Wilshire. So for me, it wasn't the best start. So if you could just explain what I mean by that, rather than me explain it, that we did lose existing stock through Wilshire that has not yet been made up. That's existing pensioner houses in Auckland.
Well, 2 points, Councillor. I think you and I have probably got a different, a non-aligned view of the start
You're probably
point at
right, David.
Wilshire. So I mean, I think without going into detail, there was originally some greater number on that for Takari City, cleared away some units that were not fit for habitation anymore. At the time the Auckland Council got that site, there was X number on it, which I think was 30 something, and there's going to be 40 when we finish this. So that's probably all the value I can add to that issue. More broadly,
Originally 60.
It was 69 actually.
more
69, that makes it even worse.
More broadly, the issue here is one of not over-promising and being realistic. So we're trying to get these houses, social houses, provided at no cost to ratepayers from effectively the redevelopment and the subsidies. Because what we've taken from the council is, well, you're not trying to get money out of this whole package, but you're not really keen on investing a whole lot more in it either. So we don't know at this point whether, when all the cash flows from redevelopment subsidies are put together, you can afford to put more social housing units there. That might be a possible outcome, but we don't think that any of us should be promising that at the moment, because these units now are over $200,000 to replace, and we don't want to put money in, so you know the numbers are going to be pretty finely balanced. And again, that's the feedback we get from the third sector. These things aren't gold mines, and trying to replace old stock with fit for purpose stock is expensive, so we're better off limiting our actual commitment to what we've got, and anything else is upside. And in addition, we know that we can deliver affordable housing, which isn't the same as social housing, but it will provide, we know there's huge need in Auckland for that tranche of housing that's between social and, you know, $700,000 plus. So, for example, a lot of the units at Wilshire are going to be selling in the 400s.
Okay. So just to follow on that question, so as we look at discussing with the consortia and the community housing providers, and if the numbers stack up, and if the council is prepared to consider putting money in an annual plan or changing the finances, this doesn't preclude that being an option for the future.
Absolutely not. That's a good point. The council can put money in any time it wants to.
Yep. Okay. Councillor Walker.
Sure. Just got a couple of questions, but first of all, I just endorse the comments made about not just maintaining, but obviously having some proportionality with the population of older people in Auckland. Couple of questions though, and I note that there's a mention that we're going to be protecting the asset, so the assumption I'm making is that we're retaining ownership at least over the land, and I would assume some ongoing relationship so that if the social housing provider falls over, we can acquire the interest back, because those circumstances have happened.
Okay, so as was the case with Wilshire, there will be, if you like, titles within these sites that will be sold off, because basically if we're looking at a model of social, affordable and kind of market housing, obviously people are buying titles probably. So as in the case with Wilshire, the council will end up owning 40 of the units, but there'll be 140 on the site that will be owned by others. In terms of the ongoing council ownership of the social housing units and keeping control of it, that's the degree, what form that takes is one of the things we need to work through with the third sector providers, because it may be that the council ends up with a significant share of the ownership of each social house, or the consortium ends up owning the social houses in which the council has certain controls and powers. I mean, that's what we have to work through. And yes, we'll be also making sure in this process that the sites, if something were to fall over, the sites don't somehow get alienated from the purpose.
Alienated from the purpose or alienated from council?
Well, the same thing, alienated from the for use for social housing. So we've got to make sure there's no way something happens that we end up losing control of the sites as being for the purpose that they exist, which is social housing and affordable housing.
I'd just like to signal an interest in the detail here, because I think that's critical going forward. I'm mindful that we shouldn't be losing the asset. By all means, we could have a relationship that's arm's length, but that does not mean reducing our asset. It could mean growing it.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And I think, if I'm understanding the presentation correctly, we need to first of all say to our team, go out and explore this with our community housing providers, and as it's reported back to us, we make sure that we work through exactly the kind of detail you're wanting, because that's in the purposes. And I think, without putting too fine a point on it, we're trying to have our cake and eat it too. How do we go and get partners so that we can access the income-related rent subsidy that is not available to council? We cannot get that. If we partner, then there's an opportunity to utilise that lump of money that is not available to us to make sure that we actually hold on to social housing. I don't think there's anyone here who's advocating that we bug out of social housing altogether. I really don't think that's it at all. Councillor Clow.
Two things. I had some